Howdy, my name's Libby Peterson, and I'm going to be analyzing some typical characteristics of sculptures during the Tang Dynasty, particularly one that caught my eye that was known as Buddha, probably Amitabha. New techniques, an increase of artist skill in literature, and a wider range of colors are all typical characteristics of art that was created during the Tang Dynasty. Many Tang artists at this time were also scholars, and they used the art that they created as means of expressing the philosophical approach that they held to life and their beliefs. Tang art was made to express an artist's beliefs and good character, though, not only the skills that they had. It was very, very common for tombs of important people during this time, namely emperors, to have sculpted figures set outside of them. The most popular subject for these sculptures was typically the Buddha. Sculptures of the Buddha were not only positioned outside of temples, though. They were also found scattered around the civilizations in homes, businesses, and other buildings, pretty much most popular buildings that you could find in the civilization. During the Tang Dynasty, figures became a lot less static, which would at times propose criticism, just because they would sometimes be compared to types of dancers. But the figures during this time definitely had a lot more flowing movement, I noticed. One particular sculpture that caught my attention was called Buddha, probably Amitabha. Amitabha, during this time, was known as the Great Savior Buddha. His name means infinite light or infinite radiance in Sanskrit, and he is associated with love and compassion. Created in the early 7th century, this sculpture is a devotion to Amitabha, and it promotes the idea of rebirth in Amitabha's Pure Land. According to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the sculpture was made using the dry lacquer technique, in which a core, that was often made of wood, is covered with clay and then wrapped in layers of cloth that have been saturated with lacquer, a tree resin that hardens when it's exposed to oxygen. This technique was widely used to create Buddhist sculptures during the Tang Dynasty time period, and is the oldest known surviving example of its type, according to the Walters Art Museum. It is assumed that this sculpture is a representation of Amitabha because the position of the Buddhist arms suggests that the hands were once held in a gesture of meditation. The hands are not there anymore, it's cut off at the wrist, but the way that his arms are positioned, you can tell that he was meditating in the sculpture. You might also notice in the sculpture that the Buddha's eyes are just barely open. At first glance, you would not even notice it. It looks like his eyes are closed. But once you look closer, you can tell that they're slightly open. And artists would often do this to show that the figure is meditating or in a state of deep concentration. He wears a simple robe that is draped over his shoulders, and the flesh of his chest and one arm is exposed. His hair is arranged in a way that is typical for Amitabha, with curls that are at the top of his head with a cranial bulge that is one of the marks of Buddha's superpowers.